Good morning. Late morning, that is. About time for the stock market to close, and we're 2 days away from Santa Claus, and so far, no gifts. The stock market's down a little over 500 as we speak. It got down close to 800 earlier. It's got the jitters again, and it's the same old business of trying to anticipate when the Federal Reserve is done raising rates. It's trying to anticipate when the correction's over. Let me just tell you that what we're trying to fix is a 15-year problem. Okay, for 15 years we have been under the mismanagement of various Federal Reserve leaders, starting with Ben Bernanke. And the last time we had a little financial collapse, Bernanke was in charge, and he introduced zero interest rate policy, which meant that they were going to artificially provide enough money to the system so that interest rates would go down to near zero. And they did that. And that started the money printing machine that provided too much money to the economy. See, inflation that we have now, inflation is caused by too much money chasing too few goods. So we've got to get things in the right proportions, and the relationships have to be correct between supply and demand and all of that stuff. And that's what this is about. But not only did Bernanke start with the zero interest rate policy, then they started, if you remember, QE1, QE2, Q being quantitative easing, okay? And then we had QE4, 5, and Janet Yellen became the Federal Reserve Chairman, and she began to do the same thing. So there was continuity of policy, and that policy, we think, being bad. So we began printing too much money in America, and then Powell came along and continued to do the same thing until we realized that we've got a problem. We've got too much money. In fact, with Yellen and Powell, they printed the deficit for the whole United States. They printed that money, bought the securities from the government and in the streets, and the average American didn't know anything was going on. The deficit in the budget was being spent, was being handled, was being bought by the Federal Reserve. So now we've got inflation, and we've got to really go back and unravel this thing. And this is the first time in history of something this big, because we have had periods of too much money in the past, and it's usually featured by a 6-month or 1 year of bad market as the Fed corrects things and rebalances, and then we go again. This one, having been 15 years, tells me that maybe we've got to be prepared for more than 1 year of battle with this. Now, we have been battling for 1 year, or we've been defensive for 1 year, and client accounts, luckily, reflect a much lower loss or damage point than the regular markets, the whole markets for bonds and for stocks. And starting out the new year, I know it's Santa Claus time and everything, but in looking at this, I really believe that Cadinha and Company is going to have to continue our battle to defend your financial position. And I'm not worried about it. We can see progress in what the Federal Reserve is doing. We can see their balance sheet. We can see some of the money in the system beginning to diminish. But there's a long way to go. You can't just undo 15 years in 15 months and throw down the gauntlet. We may have to get too much money out too fast, and that could cause other economic problems. So the Federal Reserve is trying to sail in there and do what we call a soft landing. Don't know. So far, so good. The economy is still showing strength, but I believe from an investment standpoint, we're just going to have to continue to be patient. I don't think the Federal Reserve is done. And I would expect interest rates to go higher. And when rates go higher, everybody begins to anticipate a recession. And the stock market anticipates everybody anticipating a recession, so the stock market goes down. I'm not sure where we're going, but my guess is we got more of a bumpy road. So hang in there. We're not in trouble, and we think we see a point that this whole thing can be corrected, but we have to hang in there as a people. And the legislature right now is passing a big bill because they want to keep spending, right? So the politicians want to keep spending, and the inflation hawks don't want spending. That's the wrong thing. We need to cut back on money creation. And so we're right in that transition period where we go to hopefully a more responsible House of Representatives. And more responsible votes around, including the Senate, so we can slow down this money machine. In the meantime, as investors, we're watching our rear end over here to be sure we don't back over a cliff or something like that. But so far so good. But I don't think we're in for a dramatic change. We have to keep the vigil on, keep the clamps on tight, and survive this thing. And I think we're well down the road to doing that, but we're just not quite at the end. We want to thank you for your loyalty over the years, and especially this year being a rugged year. Have a Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, whatever you plan to do with your loved ones. Do it, enjoy them, enjoy the period, and we'll be back with you next year. Thank you.